Easy, how are we?
Shawnee, feeling better by the day.
Good to hear. Good to hear. You sound like you might actually have another Ironman in you at some stage, maybe the way we were talking before we hit the record button there.
Yeah, I've actually had a decent night's sleep, and I've eaten. I don't know. I'd say I've eaten my weight twice over in the last 3 days, so I need to rein that in very quickly. But yeah, I'm feeling a hell of a lot better. We'll never say never.
Fair enough, fair enough. I almost feel bad for before because I had to fly out the Sunday evening that I dragged you in, not to drag you in, but was like, I'll do a podcast. And you were sitting there and you were there, but you're also at the same time, I feel like you just could have just curled up in bed all day and did absolutely nothing instead of recording a podcast.
You came into my hotel room. I was in bed. And you were like, come on, podcast, I have to catch a flight.
I felt bad when you got out of bed. I'm like, oh, he's still wearing his pajamas top. Oh, no, wait, no, that's his finisher t-shirt.
Oh, stop the lights.
But even though it's only a couple of days later, just for context on this one, I seen you 2 hours into your cycle, which was around 1 o'clock on the Saturday. Since then, I seen you complete an Ironman. I was out for an hour or so afterwards with Neve and, have a bit of food and an extra bottle of wine. It's so cheap over there. It's great. And then on Sunday, we recorded the podcast. I got to see a little bit of Lisbon. I flew back Sunday night. On Monday, I went to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, which was not fun, but we got through it. I did a piss poor workout. I had my own thing Monday evening. I got around 7-8 hours sleep. I've been working all day today. We just recorded the podcast. A great podcast we have now coming up. But right before we recorded this podcast, from that point is how long Keith Russell had been running. An absolutely feckin' phenomenal achievement, running for 3 days and 2 hours. He clocked up over 300 miles, Keith did, over in Tennessee for the Backyard Ultra. So absolutely phenomenal. Unbelievable.
And for anyone, I know our podcast has got a lot of followers over the last couple of weeks. For anyone that doesn't know Keith's story, have a look back a couple of episodes previous. We interviewed Keith before he was in the build-up to this World Championships for the Backyard in Tennessee, but an absolutely amazing performance to run for 3 days straight and 2 hours. And we're talking about an Ironman being hard, and God love us, I didn't get a good night's sleep. You dragged me out of bed. That man ran 300 miles in 3 days, and it's absolutely brilliant. And he's done the country proud. He's done himself proud. And keep that in mind when we're thinking towards this marathon, and that's what this next episode is all about, is starting at the very start.
Exactly. So a lot of great tips coming from Kevin English in this episode of the podcast. So with that said, if you are doing Dublin, best luck doing Dublin on Sunday. We hope to see you at the start line. If not, then we hope to see you at the finish line. And myself and yourself will definitely have a few drinks and toners afterwards, Eric. But for now, here's some tips for this year doing a Dublin Marathon, courtesy of Kevin English. Let's go. So this week on the Any Given Monday podcast, it is of course Dublin Marathon week, and he was only on the podcast 3-4 weeks ago, but he is the most downloaded guest we've ever had in the podcast, and he knew his shit, and we got a lot of good feedback from him, so we had to bring him back to the podcast. Kevin, welcome onto the show. How are you getting on?
Hey lads, all good here, yeah. Taper week, all the madness is happening at the moment.
The taper week, all the madness. That's a contradiction, Kevin. Is it not taper week? Everything's all relaxed into the big day, or how are you finding this week?
Yeah, look, particularly, I think this year, particularly, I have a lot more newbies, as I call them, like virgin marathon runners. So, yeah, it's just bombarded question after question. Look, it's great to be able to give the feedback. It's also great to put their mind at ease, with certain questions. But yeah, you wouldn't believe some of the questions being asked this week.
We have asked many of them ourselves, and I suppose that's why this podcast is kind of there. It's there as that extra reminder for people who are scrambling for that last minute nugget, that last minute thing that's going to get them there. But you'll probably agree, Kev, what they've done is done now. At this stage, what's in the bank, the hay is in the shed. Yeah. Don't light the place on fire now at this stage. Going to try increase your fitness. The work is done, and what you have is what you have at this stage. Isn't that right?
Exactly, yeah. I think you've got, particularly when people talk about the taper, you got I know some people who don't run for the last 3 weeks. I know other people that will probably reduce their load by 50%. That's all. But I think the key thing this week is to kind of keep a bit of intensity in your running. Don't just do everything really, really slow. I think Tuesday, Wednesday kind of is the cutoff for doing something a little bit something like 2K or 3K maybe at your predicted marathon pace. and that predicted marathon pace is something you definitely should kind of stick to and not get bombarded with people telling you what they think you should do. I think by now you should know really what time you're kind of aiming for.
With the predicted marathon pace, and obviously you have a lot of different balloons and set times and stuff like that. Because they run at an even pace, do you recommend as an even split? I'm really positive they do. Would you recommend people going for a certain time to hang with the balloon, slightly in front of the balloon, slightly behind the balloon, or just ignore the balloon, have your own game plan?
Most people, I give them their own plan. So if it so happens you're running with the balloons, or you're slightly behind or slightly ahead, that's your plan. I think Dublin is definitely that type of course where, let's say you're hoping to run 4 hours, you shouldn't really be 157 a halfway. You should be either, 159, 2 hours, even 201, 202 is fine with Dublin, because all the hard work is really in that first half. So you can definitely make time up. But look, most people end up going out way too fast, thinking they'll bank time, and then they blow up towards the end and kind of say it was the hills that caught me out. Really, it's most of the time it's pace judgment, I suppose. If you are going to run with the balloons, my suggestion is always run where the balloons are in sight. So maybe you run 100 meters back from the balloons. Two reasons. One, when you come up to water stations, you're not going to have people stepping across you. You're not going to be getting in other people's way, and you can see everything happening. And number two, there's a lovely feeling when, unfortunately, you might get 1,000 people going with the sub-3 balloon, but like maybe 100 will make that. The a lot of people have dreams in their heads what they're going to run, but unfortunately,
you worded that so well, Kev. You worded that so well.
I've been there. And then look, it all falls apart. But the great thing is, if your condition, say, to run sub-4 and you're running off them and people are falling back off that, it gives you a lot of confidence as you're going through the race. At halfway, you start to see you're passing by people. You get to 30K, you're passing more people. Then all of a sudden you get to 34K, it's thinned out. You can run with the pacers because it's not as many people around. And then you feel like you're in the race. And it's really that last 10, 12K is when you feel like you should be in the race. Before that, you should be really going out and feeling like you're out for a long run, because you've tapered, you feel fresh, you've done all your training. It should be a feel-good factor. If you're kind of struggling a halfway, you're going way too fast. So yeah, there's definitely pluses to going with the pacers. There's negatives. I think controlling your own race is very important, and also, like, not to knock pacers, but 95% of them are fantastic. You have to remember, pacers are human beings as well. They can get it wrong on the day. They might have an off day. I've seen pacers drop out of races. I've seen pacers 2 years ago where there was a 90-second gap at Chapelizard between one 3-hour pacer and the other 3-hour pacer. The guy at the pacing the front 3-hour pacers was gone off at maybe 256, 257 pace. And anyone knows that's a huge gap. That's a significant difference. That can ruin people's races.
Especially at that end of the scale, those minuscule minutes, those 5 seconds a kilometer is everything.
Yeah, big time. So, like, if you're going out to break 3 hours, you're going 4:15s. Someone starts running 4:08s, 4:10s, and you're not ready to run 2:55 or 2:56, you'll end up probably running 3:01, 3:02. Can really ruin your day. So, yeah, look, most people have done a lot of runs by themselves. They should know how to handle being able to run by themselves. And look, you're not going to be running by yourself, even though we say run your own race. There's always going to be someone that's running in or around you. I have a lot of runners, my sister included, that loves talking during the race. Some people, you'll know pretty quickly when you pull up beside someone and you say, "What are you aiming for?" and they don't even reply. That's not the person to be talking about. You will get other people that tell you about their family, about their work. They tell you everything, and sometimes that switches them off, and that's their way of dealing with the race day scenario. Other people want to conserve their energy, and I totally get that.
I'm definitely more conservative my energy type one, like Eric.
Yeah, I'm not even the worst of them, but I do love a chat. But it is something as well, and part of that, as you said, staying in that race. And it was something I did. And last year was just about going out and like that, treated it like a long run. All of a sudden, I looked around at 33K with the 350 balloon. There was only 15 of us left.
Yeah.
So like it's really, really important that little tip of just watch it go up the hill, watch it go down the hill, just run your own race.
Yeah.
And when you need to hold on to a group in that last 5K, that's that feeling
Yeah,
where
you
you're like,
will. You will. There's some great pacers too. They'll give you loads of encouragement. It definitely helps you, like, hang in there. And yeah, especially if you're that little bit inexperienced, a pacer can be a great thing to have on the day. But I do think that, like, that first 10K, really run your own pace, and sometimes even go a little bit slower than your predicted pace in the first 10K, because you'll make it back if you're fit enough. You can get carried away at the start, and I've done it myself. And you're looking down, and I remember even doing a marathon in Brighton, and there's a glitch in my watch, and my pace was 6 minute miles was my goal, and I'm looking at it and it's saying 8 minutes. And I'm like going, God, I must have a bug. I must be coming down with, and I was like sprinting to get up to the 6 minute pace, and next thing it goes 5:21 or something for a mile.
Oh, jeez.
And my reaction was, you gobshite. And then for comfort, then I always say to people is look for the oldest person around you, because they're usually the most experienced. And I went to a guy and I go, what are you aiming for? And he said 6 minute miles. And I go, okay, I'm going to stay with you, Yeah, so even with all my years of experience, I still made a balls of it because of these bloody watches,
We could treat them as gospel at times. Kevin, on social media, obviously everyone's talking about the marathon this week. Is there any advice that keeps popping up? You're like, no, if I see this one more time, I'm going to lose it. It's just the wrong thing that keeps being said to people, or a myth or something to do with marathon or Dublin Marathon in particular.
Is there a wrong thing that keeps coming up? I think the gels is a big one this year. I think because there's some really good brands out there. They're obviously putting a lot of marketing into it. And more people are talking about nutrition. So that's probably where I'm seeing people being told they need to take way more than they actually need to take, or maybe they've actually tried in training. So yeah, that's probably the biggest one. And the amount of people asking me how many should I take, so it's $1 million question. It's really like, it's probably somewhere between 40-60 grams per hour, but it depends on the individual and what you've tried in training. And like I'm always trying to tell people, like, your training is usually at a slower pace, so you'll burn more, you'll need more carbs in the race scenario than you would maybe. So ideally, a lot of my gang would have ran like the 3/4 marathon, and that way then they were able to practice race pace and then see what they needed to the 3/4. So let's say they needed 3 gels in the 3/4, they're probably max going to need 4 in the full. So yeah, look, it's not something I'm qualified in. So it's I come from my own experience in terms of many gels. I would usually only use 1, max 2, but then it depends on the conditions as well. Like, conditions look really good for Dublin on Sunday, touch wood, a little bit humid, but temperature looks great. So yeah, I think, yeah, the hardest thing I'm having to do this week is tell people they're not going to run a time that they think they're going to run. That's hard,
Oh,
so, yeah. People, people coming to me with maybe a PB of 1:58 for the half, and they're hoping to break 4 hours, and I'm like saying, you probably need to be a bit quicker. Plus, it does depend on the mileage that they've done within their block. So the higher mileage you've done, the more that meat and the sandwich comes together. So like, you might get someone that's around a 1:56 half will break 4 hours. Plus, when you ran your half marathon, you might have had a great 6 to 8 week block from that point, and your fitness might have grown. So I never say never with people, but I'm always trying to keep them, particularly with Dublin. So if someone is trying to break 4 hours, I'm always saying, like, and say I might think they're somewhere between 4:06 and 3:58. I'm always telling them, like, you can be 2:01 2:02 a half and make it up in the second half. But most people don't listen.
Yeah. And it is something that stuck with me from my very first marathon, was like, whatever you think whatever your half marathon is, add 15, 20 minutes. And there's a good guide for where you're at. Now, we've done a couple of them, so consistency is there, particularly if my last one, I wasn't gunning for a pace. I wasn't gunning for a win. I wasn't breaking my own records. So the ability to stick at a 5:35 for 40K actually worked out.
Yeah.
But that's with knowing nutrition, having done a few. I've done the course. I know the hills. Like you said, it took me time through Castleknock. Here's Chapel Lizard. Slow it down. I'll get it back on the other side. Yeah. But when you have the excitement, when you have the crowd, when you have the group pulling you along, the balloons are in front of you, your family's there, you can get carried away with that element. And it's just something to remember that, a wall may come, it may not come, but if it does and when it does, that's that 15 minutes. That's that buffer that you need to have in the bank, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can say buffer in the bank, but the buffer in the bank can come back to bite you in the arse, because
absolutely, yeah,
you've gone significantly probably faster than your estimated pace, and unfortunately, then your glycogen stores only last for 90 minutes. Your body gets depleted. And then when you hit that bad patch, I've listened to a few of the podcasts, and you're always talking about the bad patch, and you get through the bad patch. Bad patch as well can happen after 10K, but it doesn't mean that your race is over. So just remember that you would have had long runs as well where you had bad patches, and then suddenly you got a little bit of a downhill and you got your momentum back, or you saw, particularly when you're in a marathon, use people as like little goalposts, so you might see someone in the distance. I remember really struggling in Dublin Marathon, and there was a lad, and he was struggling the same. I tore my calf and he had done something to his hamstring, and we were like, he was limping up the road, I was limping up the road, but I kept going, just power walk and keep him. It was just something to keep me focused. And like, that was when I was in a really, really, really bad day. But look, I think particularly with people who are doing it for the first time, sometimes people talk about times, and times are fine to kind of give you that guideline to kind of hone things in the first half. But time shouldn't really matter in your first one. You should really just go out and enjoy the experience, enjoy the crowds, stop and give your loved ones a hug. There are things that you can. I remember my sister giving my mum a hug. She's no longer with us, and I just remember at the time I gave her a bollocking after, because it says, you were 2 seconds slower in the second half. That was because you stopped and gave mum a hug. Now it's kind of like, my sister's so glad she stopped and gave her the hug. I remember doing it as well in a marathon in Armagh, and what's the name? I think is it Team Care. They're from the north. They have a young son they push in the wheelchair.
Yes, right.
Yeah, they weren't actually partaking that day, but they had a sign up, and it was like, stop and give me a hug. And I was having this ding dong battle with this guy, and I kept saying to myself, if it was 4 loops, if I get him on the last lap, I'm going to stop and give them a hug, and I stopped, gave him a hug, finished the race. And of course, me being a typical runner, I went, fucking lost 20 seconds giving him that hug. Oh man, it's madness, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is. Yeah. And I suppose an important thing for people to remember is everyone has put up with you for the last 20 weeks, 16 weeks, talking about your marathon, waiting for you to finish your long run that you said you were going to start at 8, but you didn't start till 10, and now it's lunchtime. And so just remember those people who are coming out to cheer you on is really, really important, because everyone does the marathon with you, and that is a fact.
Yeah. Put up with our tantrums and and then disappearing for 3 or 4 hours every Sunday. I think another thing that kind of has come up the last week, obviously there's a lot of people catching flus, COVID, all sorts going on, sore throats. And if that does happen the week of the marathon, unfortunately, you're going to probably have to play it by ear. So maybe reduce your expectations in the first half and see how you feel. Maybe even after 10K, if you feel good, then you can kind of push on. But sometimes you don't know what that's done to the body. if you miss some, like there's some people as well in my group that have maybe missed a bit of training in the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's not the worst time to miss it, like in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but at the same time too, um, it's just more the confidence side of things. Their confidence will be dented quite a bit, when you lose some long runs or you're trying to make it back up, um, and then you've also got people who carry in niggles and injuries, and again, unfortunately, Martin is going to find you out if something's not right. So if that be the case, I know I'm a hypocrite by saying this because I continued after Bushy Park when my calf went 1 year, but I definitely drop out. Like, you will find an ambulance or someone will help you out, but there's nothing worse than making an injury worse, and then you've literally lost all that fitness that you built up. And then you're, fortunately, then with Dublin, you're carrying it into Christmas, festival season. You get into January, then you're like starting from scratch again. So, yeah, and look, just as I said to you earlier, it's just enjoying the actual day. Dublin's a funny one too, though. Like you're kind of funneled in at the end, and it's like you're like a caged animal. There's like these big cages either side of you, and like there's that feeling of like I've just done a marathon. Like everyone in my family should be around me, and there's kind of like an anticlimax a little bit other than getting your medal, and then you'll find you're like hugging a stranger like beside you, going well done, and it's like the two of you kind of feel that way. It's a strange one.
There's be bodies everywhere. Last year was a really weird one as well because half went left for the medals and half went right into the tents. Like, and like I've done Dublin 4 or 5 times, and that was the first year where it just seemed like people were dropping like flies. Like the last 2 miles was just carnage. Like the amount of people that dropped, and it was the first time I'd ever seen not one but multiple pacers dropping during the course as well. Did you hear anything particular about last year being too humid or hot or
humid? Yeah. And it's happened in a race before. I remember a half marathon about must be like 8 or 10 years ago, and in the space of like an hour, the temperature went up for like 4 degrees, which doesn't sound that much, but people are standing around like and loads of layers on them in this half marathon. All of a sudden, then they're taking off and they're like, yourself, you kind of go, it's too much hassle zipping off my jacket when I'm running. I'll wait another while, and before they know it, then they've overheated. So yeah, Dublin have layers on like that. You can take off, like whether it's arm sleeves. Hang on, back. Whether it's arm sleeves, woolly hat, you can take off. Layers that are from pennies or something cheap that you don't mind chucking to the side of the road or at the start.
I'm sure all that clothes is collected with charity anyway. So like I've heard people give out before, all the clothes just wasting the ground. Like no, that's picked up and that's donated from there. When you were on the podcast a couple weeks ago, you talked about the importance of getting sleep 2 days before the marathon, whereas the night before you might 2 days before. Of course, that leads into the Saturday and the expo, and I have made every mistake there is to make with expos. Like I am the kind of guy who the first couple of years, Eric did as well, I'm going to call you out on this one, bought the beetroot juice and thinking the day before if you have a jar this going to make difference, and all the jellies and been buzzing, and the next thing you know I'm have to walk around for 5-6 hours and my legs are dead and I'm like I'm in trouble now. So for those marathon virgins as you put them going for the expo, what would be your advice?
Were you peeing pink?
I didn't remember what I was
freaking out. What's this?
I remember just seeing like half the jar left. It was just nasty stuff. And now I was actually talking to people this week that say within 4 or 5 days, it might work, but a day before is not going to work, and all the freebie jellies and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, at Dublin Expo, not because I'm this is the first year I'm not going to be working at it like in 15 years. It's an okay expo. Like there's nothing major there that you probably haven't seen in the shops. Just straight in, get your number, maybe pot around. You might meet a few friends, have a little chit chats and that, and get out of there as quickly as you can. So actually, remember we were just talking about that the 2 days beforehand, and remember I was telling you about like Bernie waking up her friend because she couldn't sleep the night before.
Yeah,
and I also read another really good one about a guy called Steve Way. I don't think he runs anymore, but Steve Way was like 40-day smoker, took up running really late, and I think at the age of 40 ran 2:16 for the marathon and made the Commonwealth Games for England. But the night before, this is funny, the night before London Marathon, he slept in the camper van. Yeah.
Oh,
So like you couldn't I think he was like the first non-elite, like the first guy outside of the elite. That's happened a few times now with British runners. Not as much now because obviously the standard's gone right back up. But there was a few years where British runners weren't like running, sub 220s and stuff. So yeah, he was a good example, like of, the insignificance, I suppose, of the night before. Don't stress about it, and obviously you're up that bit extra early, with the adrenaline, and also then you don't want to sleep in, and obviously then you have to get to your pen an hour beforehand. 45 minutes is it? I think they have on it.
45 minutes or so, yeah. But the great thing about this marathon, the day it's on, is you do get that extra hour of sleep because of the clock's going, which is like perfect planning into a bank holiday weekend.
Like I think a lot of people now are overthinking it. They're thinking of their paces. They're thinking about too many things. I think you just need to write down what are the things you can control. Even some people will write their splits on their arm. Some people will, because also you got to remember, and this is a key one. I just had a chat with one of the guys, Trevor, I coach, because Trevor in Manchester ran, I think, 3 hours and like 12 seconds. Right.
Wow.
And he thought he had it, like he was looking at his watch, but obviously you run a longer tangent, and with the marathon, it's your official time. So it's not what time is on Strava. It's not what time is on your watch. It's the time that from the time you cross, you'll have a chip time and mat. And once you cross that mat, basically your clock is on. And then when you pass the finish line, Matt, and I'm saying this because a lot of people don't know this. And then I saw a brilliant one in the Great North Run. And the girl's getting her watch ready. And obviously the GPS isn't kicking in. So she's standing behind the mat like this. Everyone's trundling past. And she's still trying to get it. And then you can see her face just go, I got it. And she starts and she goes. But like, she did the right thing in one way, because, she waited till she was passing that rather than having to play around with it when she passed it. So I think as well, you got to remember, with Dublin, you'll be surrounded by so many people, and it's like getting onto a Lewis at peak time. You feel like everyone's kind of pushing you on or pushing you off. So don't be afraid to like go towards the back of your pen. Like, don't be thinking like they're getting an advantage. They're not. So your time, like I said, is when you cross the mat. So if you're at the back, just think of it like you're giving them a little head start, but you're not really. Don't feel like you have to run like with everyone else in the stampede and be pulled along, and all of a sudden if your goal pace is 5:30 a kilometer, you're running 5 minutes, and that's not going to be any good.
Yeah, to your point there a minute ago, I think last year, I think RQ said it as well, it was like 42.6 or something we ended up doing with going through crowds and not taking the turns the exact same way. And that can play with you when you're on that last mile coming in. You think it's just, it's that little bridge coming any second now. I'm at 42.1, 42 point. Oh, where is it? You still got that other little bit to go, especially if you're going for times.
I remember reading a study. I think the average is 320 meters is the
over.
Average. Most people do over. Yeah. So if you're doing under that, you're doing really, really well. I actually seen a guy do Amsterdam there, and he came under. I was like, that's amazing.
What was on the footpath.
Yeah, whereas you cut a corner,
you don't get that Strava badge for doing a marathon though, so your Garmin badge.
Yeah. Official time.
Yeah. After the marathon, just a quick one on recovery. I've seen this quote a few times that for every mile you race. Yeah, I can see the head dropping already. And this is one where I've never really got, but I love your opinion on it. For every mile you race is 1 day recovery. So that you shouldn't be training hard until 26 days after a marathon. Obviously you coach a lot of people. You've been coaching
Yeah.
nearly 6 years now. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the last bit was significant. What you said. You said nothing hard. Yeah, I definitely think like for the next kind of at least 2.5 weeks, there should be nothing hard in there. Um, it for me, it depends on how well the athlete is conditioned. So you'll have like Wayne, who I coached there, won Galway Bay Marathon the day of the Ireland Scotland match. What's that? 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
yeah.
he ran 2:32, which was probably 2 minutes quicker than I wanted him to run. But he had a really good competition from I think a Polish guy. We didn't really know he was coming. So but his recovery is really, really good because he consistently does a lot of 160K weeks. Okay, so for him, well, how many marathons is that in a week? So okay, the intensity of that marathon was probably higher than we wanted to go, but his goal will be sub 2:30 in Dublin. So if you were to take that theory with him, he shouldn't be running Dublin in 3 weeks, but I know he's going to go quicker. All going well. Actually, his ankle is at him this evening. So
That's just the nerves.
yeah, true. So yeah, look, I think where people go wrong is they take too long off and then they find it hard to get back. But at the same time, too, I would leave people. I don't talk to my athletes for a week after the marathon because I know if I talk about them, there'll be an influence there from either side. They'll say, "What's next?" And then I'll be like, all buzzing, "Let's go for this." And before we know it, then they're training the following week. So I'd kind of leave them for a week and then I check in with them after a week and then say, "How are you feeling? How's the body?" Usually after about 10, between 7 and 10 days, they might do short runs, like 10 or 15-minute runs, but no further. And then we just go on like listening to body and checking in with me. How did that feel? And then by 3 weeks time, we're probably back to maybe, depending on the level, it might be somewhere between 45 minutes and 90 minutes is back to their long run. But definitely intensity. Like I remember doing my first marathon, a good friend of mine, Gary O'Hanlon, and Gary won the race, I think, in 2:40. I was third in 2:43. So there wasn't like a significant difference in our time, 3 minutes. This is on a Sunday, and we went down to the track on the Wednesday, the 300-meter track in the north, and we said we'd do some 300 reps. And Gary's obviously a lot faster than me at the time, even though he's only 3 minutes ahead of me, but it's just one of them days. And he was giving me like 6 to 8 seconds head start on the 300s. And I remember we did two of them, and all of a sudden the 6 or 8 seconds was staying the same. So we were actually running the same pace. He was wiped out. And like, a guy at that level, that stature, that marathon took a lot because he was obviously coming for his standard. He wasn't where he needed to be, but that took way out of him than it did out of me because I was more conditioned. Even though he bet me he's a way better runner. So my point being, because he wasn't conditioned, he probably needed an extra week off than me. And you'll always kind of know the people who probably have trained properly. The next day, you'll be walking okay. If you haven't trained right, you'll be walking down the stairs backwards. There's also, there's also that element where some people can push themselves beyond the red line and they really know how to get the best out of themselves and they will be sore and broken up the next day. But yeah, look, it does vary from person to person, I suppose, is probably the best way of saying it.
That's very fair.
Don't look at me.
I've asked the last couple of questions. I know I'm not going down the stairs next day after some of them now. This year is going for different reasons. That's very fair. Kevin, is there anything we've kind of left out, you think, in terms of marathon prep, people getting ready for the recovery afterwards during the race? Any tips or any questions you've constantly been asked that we have not really approached?
I suppose tips for the race. Obviously, I would say again, go back to 2 days beforehand, and get your kit lined out, what you're wearing, stick to it. Again, you go into the expo and someone will try and sell you these fancy socks that say they don't blister. If you haven't blistered in the socks you're currently wearing, there's no need to change. Um, Again, going back to gels, just stick to what you've done in training. Don't think that there's going to be a super duper gel out there that's going to make you run 10 minutes quicker. It's not going to happen. Sip the bottles. So I think they'll probably be giving out the small baby bottles like they usually do. So keep it in your hand for a little bit of a while and take a few sips over maybe a duration of 5 or 6 minutes, and then you can pop it in the bin or toss it to the side. So it's nice to get rid of it so it's not in the way of someone. I know one runner that went over in a bottle and did their ankle ligaments. So just be respectful of other runners, I suppose. I think with your gels, you don't have to take the full gel in one go. So maybe just take, I know they're sticky and they're messy, but maybe just you try and get it down maybe in 2 or 3 pieces rather than shoving it all down your mouth, because it goes down the wrong way. You'll find you're catching your breath and you'll slow down dramatically. Going back to pacing, you can ruin your race in the first 10K. You can't win it in the first 10K. Just be prepared for that last 10K, as in like that is your race, the last 10K. It's not your first, not your second. Break up the race maybe into 10K segments and have your splits written down on your wrist, because we talked about the extra yardage you might run. So check in at 10K, have a split time. Your watch might say 10.13. So there you're 130 meters. You've ran an extra 130. So just be thinking of that then if your goal is sub 4 and your watch is telling you, oh yeah, you have it. And then at the end you don't. What else? Someone who's on the course, like your loved ones or people who are supporting you, maybe get a drink made up, like a carb drink that they can give you, a small one. Because obviously you can't pop them in a bottle unless you're carrying them. And it's a nice pick me up when you meet them, and it's like you're getting secret fuel. It's just a good placebo. You should be wearing a Superman cape. What else? Look, there's so many things. I think you could be here all day talking about it, but keep things simple.
My last little one is a very insignificant one, but can cause you a little bit of shower pain afterwards, is Vaseline. The nips. Look after the nips. There's a photograph made down a marathon, and there's 2 red rivers down the front of my t-shirt from my nipples. So,
not a good. It's not a good post-marathon picture, is it? With the medal.
2 pointers.
On that as well. Okay, might see it's nothing to do with times, nothing to do with performance. When you cross the line, wait till about 3 or 4 strides after the line to stop your watch. Because nothing worse than having a finish line photo and you're like this.
Yeah.
Right? Strava, for 4 seconds, it's not going to matter. You're going to have your lovely big caption, your title, and saying, I ran X time, official time, don't mind the Strava time. Wait till you finish. Try and smile at the finish as well. Sometimes it's hard to do. It's just sometimes it might be the only marathon you've ever ran. It's nice to have a really cool picture at the finish. What else? The nips is a good one, definitely. If you have body glide or Vaseline, rub on the inside of the thighs of your bloke nipples, even the back of the arms. Sometimes chaffing can come from the arms.
That happened to me one year. They were in tank top one year. The first time I ran the marathon and do the tank top, all underneath the backs of the arms and stuff had it. And then I think Eric, you told me before, the Vaseline above the eyebrows, so sweat comes into my eyes. I find that's really good having it there as well.
And it'll just trickle to the outside. It actually doesn't go. Yeah, it's a good one. Rather than the 80s sweatband, you could be wearing one of them.
So I think I'm LeBron James or something doing it.
But one that gets me is where the race belt is going to sit, depending on you. Mine chafes just on my hips there as well, so I just put Vaseline on as well. So.
I saw one from some running coach, one of the Facebook groups. They had the neck snoodies you get from some races, like run the line, stuff like that. You put that, you step into your 2 feet and put it around your waist, reverse it, and then you half it, and then put the gels and stuff in there. So it's like really tight to you and stays close to your body instead of having Like sometimes the waist belts can be dangling. Now I haven't done it, so I can't recommend it. But it looked really good in the video. It looked like it was proper tight in and up from there.
The only thing with that is if you have 4 gels in that and you go to take out one, they'll all fall out.
Yeah, I'm not trying that.
I'm not gonna try on race day now. You said that. If it's, I don't know. I'm trying to imagine now. I've got a big one that's folded, and then I'd be afraid of running the whole thing just rips and your gels all over the ground. So probably don't try it on race day for the first time.
Look, I know people that put them under the gels under the cap, and they might wear the arm sleeves just to shove them up the top of the arm sleeves. I don't like having gels on my back just because it's one of the warmest areas. And then the gels they taste bad enough, but warm gel is horrendous. Like, it's like Coca-Cola warm. It ain't the same as Coca-Cola ice.
There's so much we can do, but I suppose to just bring it back to the basics is your pre-set up, as you said. Make sure you know the kit. Don't go wild at changing it and putting waistbands around your head and headbands around your waist. Stick to your nutrition plan. The work is done. The recovery will happen whether you like it or not, whether it's 26 days or 2 days. Your body is going to dictate it.
I think as well, if you plan to run with a buddy, a lot of people would do their training with people and then they go, we're going to race together. And sometimes that might not be you might just have to make a pact where you kind of go, if you're feeling good, push on. Because you can ruin. I know a couple last year I coached, and like I'm not going to say male or female or whatever because they'll know, but one of them was in at least 45 minutes better shape than the other one, and the person probably feels like they wasted a marathon, even though it was great for them to run together, husband and wife together. I think it could have nearly caused divorce in the end, so just be careful.
And what we like to say is start together, shake hands crossing the line, and then we'll see each other at the finish.
Yeah.
And it's always something since our first, and we nearly killed each other in our first one. Yeah. But after that, we always start every race together. And as we cross the line, a little handshake, you'll see each other for the first K, 2K, 3K anyway. But then the race changes within a couple of K, and you'll see each other at the finish.
I think some people are stressing about the pens as well and where they are and like they're not in a high enough one and stuff like that. I wouldn't be worrying about that. Run your own race, as I said earlier. There's one other thing I was going to say. What was it? Oh yeah, the other thing is you'll probably find when you finish you'll say never again, and then later on you'll be in the pub and you'll sign up for another marathon that evening.
Guilty of all these, Kevin. I really am.
He knows us.
It really is.
Just on that, if anyone, they don't have to be coached by me as well. I'm taking a group every year. I take a group in April. Last 2 years we've done Manchester. This year we're going to do Hamburg Marathon on the 28th of April. So means you can enjoy the Christmas, get back on a plan in January, and then you're 17 weeks then to Hamburg. It's the end of April. They also do a relay and a half marathon there, which is pretty cool. So you can bring, maybe your husband or wife or your partner is taking up running. They might want to do the relay or they might want to do the half and they're not ready for the full. So that's going to be one for our bucket list next year.
And it gives you a target through Christmas as well, which is absolutely brilliant.
And I think just when you finish the marathon, like we talked about the recovery aspect, but maybe it's no harm maybe to sign up for a 5 or a 10K, before the year is out, because a lot of people will be at their fitness they've ever been, and then they'll carry that fitness over, particularly when you're fresh and you're not doing the big mileage that you would have been doing for the marathon. So definitely sign up for a couple of races to keep you kind of honest over Christmas. And then in the new year, then obviously a lot of people then will have bigger aspirations. You'll learn a lot from your first marathon. That's why you'll see the stories of John or Mary ran 5 hours and now they're down to 3.5 hours because they've learned a lot from the first. They learned maybe they didn't do enough long runs. Don't be stressing if it's your first one either, and you talk to someone maybe that's experienced and they've done 15 runs over 30K. That has no significance to your run or your race, so
and look, as we always say, the first marathon is always more impressive than someone that's done 10. For a person crossing that finish line is much better than someone saying they've done a 3 hour. You know, when you get one done and you settle and you learn your lessons, then it's time to start really setting times for yourself and being disappointed if you don't get a time. But for your first one, it's just learn and enjoy.
You get more bang for your buck being out there longer, don't you?
Absolutely.
Well, I didn't feel like that my first one doing the 5 hour, and my last one was 3.5, Kevin. So you're reading way too much into all my mistakes. I wish I had you 3 years ago. If there was ever a reason for getting a running coach, getting the fast track, it's this, because everything you're saying, I have done the 5 hour with him, beside him, going to kill each other, because he was running my pace and I ruined his pace. And when he walked, I wanted to go. And then when he was ready to go, I wanted to walk, and we killed each other. So I've had people since in the next couple of marathons be, I'll run with you in this one. I'm like, no, I'll see you in Tono's finish line. I have a couple of points with you then, but not do that.
Do you wear music when you do the marathon?
No,
neither is.
No. I always in training, but never in a race, especially Dublin.
We were up at Galway, and like probably the most annoying thing as a supporter, we'll talk about the supporters here.
Okay.
You're cheering someone and they have the music on. You're like, oh, wasting me.
That's when you pick up the oranges, Kevin, and bounce it off their head.
I was taking cans of fruit.
Yeah, I never got that. On a race day. I know I did Galway last year, and I actually talked on the podcast. One person was wearing headphones, and he literally took them off once. He turned to me and goes, "Are we on the right track?" And I'm like, "It's 8:15 in the morning, buddy. There's no one else out here except 10 people around you running. Yes, you're all right." And he was just completely switched off with the headphones, and away he went. And Dublin, there's such a great crowd. Like, when are you going to have 300,000 people ever cheering you on the race? Like, take it in.
You'll feed off that, like, and I know other people then that would have like the Rocky music on for the last couple of miles, like, you know, they feel they need that, and you're kind of going, the crowd is way better than Rocky music, you know. And also then, like, you could have a malfunction with your music, and all of a sudden, you know, panic station because you're so used to it. So yeah, look, I've never ran with music. I wouldn't run with music, but there will be people out there that will, and make sure your gadget is powered up. You know, same with your Garmin as well. Make sure that's powered up. That could put someone off as well. You know, where it's not functioning, or the battery's gone or whatever. You know, and you're like, oh shit. You know,
it's just an extra thing about.
Are you allowed course in this podcast?
And we are now. They haven't copped onto us yet. We don't have to put on that warning that we say bad things. But look, one of these days we'll have to put a warning on this.
Yeah, deadly.
Yeah, we sometimes try not to, but it just comes out. Because you forget we're actually sometimes recording and talking about other people, or talking with other people and stuff like that, and just let it flow. But anyway, Kevin, thank you very much for all the tips and stuff for this week on the podcast. Best of luck to you and all your athletes this weekend.
Best of luck to everyone,
And
can't wait for it.
Yeah, I think neither can I. It's been not the best friend on my own end to get there, but it's always a great day. It's always a great session. The atmosphere afterwards is always so good. So I'm definitely looking forward to that part of it. And Eric, we might see you in the finish line, or the starting line anyway. So we'll see. And that is it.
Yeah, look, we'll see. Thanks very much. We'll see you around the start line.
I'll be out on the bike, so I'll see you out there. Yeah, the bike's easier.
And that is it for myself, Eric, and Gavin. Take care.